Crazy podcast. Before we introduce ourselves, we of course would like to introduce the podcast, which is the mental health podcast for people who hate. Mental health podcast. We rehearsed this. We
didn't actually. It was nice. That was Lisa, totally spontaneous.
Yeah, that was spontaneous. Lisa, tell the listeners about our podcast. They're not listeners. Tell the viewers.
Ooh, viewers. Well, our podcast, which you can find at psychcentral.com/notcrazy.
Which we wrote on the screen for you.
Well, I know. Well, but so you got to say it out loud too. It's like multiple.
I don't know where to point.
Yeah, I know. I keep doing it backwards because I see and I want to adjust my hair, but then I do the wrong hand because it's not a mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
All right, tell everybody about the podcast and I'll leave you alone.
Okay. I think that might be all the information I have about the podcast. I know where it's located. It's at psychcentral.com/notcrazy. You should all go there now to subscribe. And then it's Gabe and I. We have occasional guests and talking about mental health, mental illness, psychology, and mostly about how mental illness has affected our own lives.
Why should people listen? I mean, is it because we're married or because we're
not
divorced?
Married. We're divorced.
I meant to say, right. Is it because we're divorced?
We used to be married is what you tried to say.
That is what I tried to say. Thank you for correcting me. People love being corrected.
Which is great because I am so good at it. It's so great that people enjoy that so much because it's like my superpower. I am so good at correcting people, especially Gabe. I am so good at correcting Gabe. And someone did point out to me once that I correct him a lot, but it's not my fault because he's wrong a lot. Right. So I really feel like that one's not on me. But yeah, it has been pointed out to me that I interrupt him to correct him on very minor points a lot. My bad.
Notice I'm not interrupting you to tell you that you're wrong of that assessment. Lisa, what are we going to be doing here for the next hour? Why should anybody pay attention to us? Obviously, it's in the description, but what is the goal of the next hour here on The Mighty, This Emotional Life, Psych Central, my Facebook? We're just on so many YouTube channels, Facebook channels.
Technology is amazing.
Technology is amazing. What's the goal? Why should people stick around?
Because you're gonna tell us your questions and we're going to answer them. So you get that engagement. You're going to stick around so that you can hear what our answers are to your questions.
And where do they put their questions so that we can see them and answer them?
I don't know.
In the comment section.
Oh, well, I thought it was going to be more complicated. Yeah, I knew that one. I thought it was a more complicated thing. In the comment section on all of those platforms.
Why would you make it complicated?
Oh, I don't know. Why'd you ask the question? I didn't know why if it's easy, you don't have to tell anything. I was like, wow, we really should have rehearsed this because I don't know. So yeah, I don't actually know how any of this works. It's just kind of magic. Gabe handles all my electronics.
So while everybody is typing in their questions in the comment section, sincerely, just put any question that you have about bipolar disorder, mental illness, anxiety, and we will do our best to answer. Just ask right there in the questions. And I think, Lisa, it is time to get started. I think that we have bantered enough, introduced ourselves enough, and the questions, they are coming right now.
Ooh, good job, Gabe. Perfect timing. All right. Melissa Sanderson asks, I'm so happily divorced too. It's the best.
I'm not sure that there is a question there, but yes. Yes, it is. Yeah,
same. US. Yay.
I don't know if Melissa is also besties with her ex and does a podcast and Facebook Live show, but just a lot of people don't do that. I know that there are tons of other comments, and Lisa and I are going to go ahead and address all of those because sometimes they're fun. Lisa, are you ready for another comment?
Absolutely. Although I really like that last comment. You'd be surprised. Well, you wouldn't be surprised, Melissa, because you get a ridiculous amount of attention if you're divorced, but still speaking, much less friendly. It is the number one thing that people comment on, which I suppose is good, but it's I don't know. It's very strange to me, and it's very strange. And then people act like they're letting you in on a secret. They'll come up to me and go, "Oh, I'm friends with my ex-husband too."
It's really sad
because we're in a secret club.
It is sort of sad that we live in a society where if you have a lot of animosity towards your ex-spouse, or if you are on bad terms, if you're fighting a lot, if you're angry, if you hate, I mean, it's just, if you say anything positive about an ex-lover, spouse, date, I mean, just people are just like, that's the goal. That is acceptable. I hate her. Oh, well, that tracks. That's good. But if you're like, no, I think she's a really, really good person. Our marriage didn't work out. In fact, we're really good friends. People are like, well, that's unusual. That's wrong. That's wrong. I guess I get that it's unusual, but why is it wrong? Obviously we want you to put your mental health questions in it. Lisa and I can talk about this all day, mostly because people ask us about this all day, but let's get to some questions. All right. The first question is now.
All right. Nicole Garcia asks, how do you manage symptoms and working? That is a difficult thing.
Yeah, so first off, managing symptoms has to fit into whatever you're doing. Forget about the and working part. You can put and anything. How do you manage symptoms when you're at home? How do you manage symptoms when you're babysitting? How do you manage symptoms at a holiday party? How do you manage symptoms while driving? Obviously, a big part of managing symptoms is the arena in which the symptoms are. So your specific question, of course, was how do you manage symptoms and working? One huge shout out that you understand that part of symptom management is managing the symptoms when they occur, where they occur, and how they occur. So many people just want to target the symptom and they don't take into account the environment. And I personally believe that's only half the story. Managing the symptoms where you are is important. For me, managing symptoms while working is a delicate balance of informing human resources supervisors, coworkers, and setting the expectations. For example, I get overwhelmed very easily. I have anxiety, and anxiety is, it's kind of a bear, right? It just kind of crops up unannounced, and it's just like, hey, you're having anxiety, yay! So one of the things that I have to do to manage anxiety while working is let the people around me, customers, coworkers, people know that sometimes I take breaks at weird times. It's not because I'm lazy. It's not because I'm not interested in what's going on. It's just because I need that break. And I explain to them why. I explain to them because of the anxiety. So if I'm not at my desk for 5 or 10 minutes, again, it's not because I'm lazy. It's because I'm taking a lap. I'm walking around the building. I'm going for a cup of coffee. I'm doing whatever it takes to get back in the moment and get back to their work. And one of the things that helps me just manage the anxiety is that they understand. And I have a history of producing, good work and meeting their deadlines and doing everything that it can, including staying after work to do it. So when they're like, why is Gabe not at his desk? He needs a moment, well, a mental health break, or who cares? He meets his deadlines. We don't care. That is part of, at least for me, working with my customers and my supervisors and my boss and my human resources to understand what I can do and how I can manage that anxiety at work, and making sure that they understand it. And that helps alleviate my anxiety because I feel like we're a team managing that. Lisa, things to add?
The only thing I would say is you may or may not want to disclose at work. You may or may not want to tell people that you have mental illness. That could turn out poorly, so your mileage may vary. But at least here in the U.S., you do have the options of the Americans with Disabilities Acts and the reasonable accommodations. And it's there for a reason. That can be extremely helpful if you feel like it's something you can utilize.
Lisa, thank you so much. I think that what we want to stress is obviously it is a delicate balance. I almost came out and saying, well, the best way to manage symptoms while at work is to get a job that works with your symptoms best. And I'm reminded of this long and involved story about how my chosen line of work I had to give up because, well, it was basically when networks went down, I fixed them. Well, when networks go down, companies lose millions of dollars in productivity. So it's a very high stress job. So clearly that wasn't for me, and I had to move into something that was lower stress for me because that was better. Don't set yourself up to fail. But I think that Lisa's advice is much more practical. Remember FMLA, remember human resources, get ahead of it. Don't wait until there's a crisis to explain to human resources or your supervisors what accommodations you need. Get ahead of it. Ask for accommodations before you need them. One, especially in the case of anxiety, it could prevent you from needing them. And two, you want to negotiate from a position of strength. And the worst time to have a fire drill is when the building is on fire. So just get ahead of it. Keep that in mind. Set these things up before rather than later. All right, Lisa, you ready for the next question?
Absolutely. Next question.
I love how you say absolutely all the time.
Oh, see, that's one of my words. I'm supposed to stop, well, not stop, but I'm supposed to limit my saying of absolutely, just, very, and so. Absolutely is one of my words, but I can't stop. I don't know. I
Don't
need
forget
other words.
We want to get
Well,
and you know.
That's an advanced skill. I'm not going to be ready for that yet. I can only do like 3 things at a time. That'll be in a couple of years, maybe. Okay, question. My question is, do either of you have bipolar disorder, and how does it affect your everyday life?
Yes,
Gabe?
I am the resident bipolar. I live with bipolar disorder. I was diagnosed when I was 25. I'm 43 now, so almost 18 years ago. Obviously, I had all of the symptoms of bipolar disorder before that. I just was really late to getting diagnosed because nobody in my family understood that I needed help. But yes, I live with bipolar disorder, and the way that it affects my everyday life. So I'm going to tell you how it affects my everyday life now, and I consider myself to be in recovery now. And I define recovery as I spend more of my day living my life than I do managing bipolar disorder. But it affected my life very differently when I was undiagnosed and didn't know that I was sick. And from the time that I was diagnosed to the time I reached recovery took 4 years. So it affected my life a lot differently during that, because I was learning coping skills. I was going to therapy. I was finding the right medications. I was dealing with medication side effects and insurance companies and on 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 and on. It was extraordinarily difficult, but I managed and I made it. And the way that it affects my life now is sort of twofold. One, I always have to be aware of it. And I say this because as much as I would like to be like, hey, I reached recovery, I don't have to pay attention to this anymore. The minute you stop paying attention to symptoms, etc., that's when bipolar disorder can really escape. So the way that it affects my everyday life, mainly right now, is that I'm always monitoring my symptoms. I'm always making sure that I've had to learn the difference between sadness and depression, excitement and mania. I've had to be humble to the fact that those around me might see something that I don't. So when they tell me something, I have to be willing to have a discussion with them instead of just dismissing them. It's a chronic illness, and I have to manage that chronic illness every day, and that has an impact on my life. Now, I could go on this long and involved rant about managing mental illness or managing bipolar disorder in a pandemic, because right now the majority of my coping skills are illegal. And that's really tough. I can't go sit at a restaurant. I can't go on vacation. I can't stop and smell the roses. In Ohio, where I live, it's of course gotten better. Restaurants are open. There's more to do, but we can't gather in crowds. We can't go on vacation. We can't go to concerts. We can't go to plays. Movie theaters are still closed here. It's been very, very difficult, but I have also been proud of myself that I'm very, very nimble. So as soon as I figure out how bipolar disorder affects my everyday life changes. The important thing that I want to stress before I pass it over to Lisa is that bipolar disorder impacts my life every single day, and I have to manage it every single day. And the minute that I think that I don't, well, that really gives bipolar disorder an entry point. Lisa does not have bipolar disorder, but because we've known each other for 20 years, I imagine that you have some things to say about this.
Well, the question is how. Thank you, Gabe. The question is, how does it affect your everyday life? And how doesn't it? It affects every aspect of life, like any chronic illness, like you said, Gabe. The example we always give is diabetes. Let's say you're diabetic and someone says, oh, how does this affect your everyday life? Well, it does. It just does. It affects your everyday life. Let's see. So I'm sorry, I'm distracted. I can't do 2 things at once. So how does it affect your everyday life? It affects your everyday life almost completely, because this is a chronic illness that you need to manage on an ongoing, continuous basis.
Good job, Lisa.
Thank you.
Ready for the
Mic
next
drop.
question? Here, let's do a high five. Hang on, let me. No, it's this way. No, I don't. High five.
Yeah, I'm never going to be able to figure that out.
You got to do.
Yeah,
all
because
right.
It's a mirror image. Okay.
There's a question.
Okay.
You have been saved.
I'm on antidepressants, but when in public, there's too many people in my place. My anxiety starts flying off the roof. How do I cope with that kind of anxiety? That's a difficult question. The first thought I had, though, is you're saying that you're still struggling with your anxiety. It sounds like at a really high level, like it's not under the control where you want it to be. So maybe you're not on the right antidepressants. Maybe you're not on the right medication. Maybe you need a change. This is the type of thing you should discuss in depth with your doctor if you have a therapist, and see if they can work with you. You don't have to, just because you're at this level now doesn't mean you can't be higher. Now, I personally do not have a lot of anxiety, but Gabe does. What do you think, Gabe?
I'm going to echo a lot of the sentiments that Lisa just said. One of the things that I picked out, as you said, I'm on antidepressants, but I'm having anxiety. There are anti-anxiety medications. There are coping skills specific to anxiety. And I this is not in your question, so I'm kind of cherry picking this out. So I apologize if this is not the situation for you. But a lot of people believe that depression and anxiety are the same thing, that depression is driving their anxiety. Some people even go the other way that says anxiety is driving the depression. And while it is true, there's some fluidity in mental illness. I prefer to sort of attack them as individuals. That even when they're together, it's anxiety and depression doing something that's causing me. It's not one or the other. They're separate. And in your question, it doesn't. Again, it's just a question, but it doesn't appear that you're doing anything just for anxiety. Learning coping skills that are specific to anxiety, taking a medication or getting a treatment that is specific to anxiety. And an antidepressant just simply may not be enough. So it's worth approaching resolving just an anxiety issue unrelated to depression. Now, again, we have to look at the entire individual and on and on and on. I understand that it's not that simple, but for the purposes of that answer, you need to learn some coping skills for anxiety. That said, I sort of have this problem too, which is odd because I love crowds and I love people and I do, and I love public speaking, and people they are shocked when they're like, wait, you don't like large crowds of people? You love concerts and plays and being on stage and meeting lots of people and being the center of attention. How can you not like this? And the answer, of course, is complicated, but I do like being around a lot of people as long as I'm in charge. And you're thinking, well, I can't be in charge of everything. But there's ways to take back some of that control. One of the things that I do before I go anywhere, literally anywhere, is scout the place out. I want to know where the bathroom is. I want to know where the exits are. I want to know all of the escape routes. And I find the best position where I have multiple ways to get out. So if I am overwhelmed, I've got clean access to the back door, clean access to the front door, and clean access to the bathroom. So now I have 3 escape routes, and I'm going to be honest, 95% of the time I don't need them, but I have them, and that's extraordinarily reassuring. If I'm going with Lisa, my wife, a friend, anybody like that, I engage them, so that I can whisper in their ear, hey, I got to get out of there. And Lisa, she has also planned all the escape routes. She also can run interference, so she can say, Gabe, oh my God, I left something in your car. Can you help me get it out? And then Lisa and I have to leave. And therefore it's not Gabe's fault. Gabe doesn't want to leave. Lisa's making him leave, or his friend, etc. And finally, I'm one of these people that sits with my back to the wall so that I don't like people behind me. So I can see the whole room. I'm also not going to lie, it kind of helps being a hand talker, because people don't want to be near you if they're afraid that while you're talking, you're going to smack them in the face. Make yourself larger than you are. Now, I didn't do that on purpose. I just have noticed that because I'm such a big guy that works. I don't know your stature, et cetera, but sincerely, I do believe that, sort of being in control of your space kind of helps. Don't put yourself against the wall, move yourself out. People are unlikely to go behind you if you're standing 2 feet away from the wall, but you've got that room behind you that can help. Lastly, maybe don't go into a situation that, baby steps, build up. I didn't start going to, concerts or bars with 1,000 people where we're all jam packed in the day that I got diagnosed with anxiety. I had to work up. So Lisa, do you have anything to add to that before we jump into a comment?
Just to emphasize the recon aspect of things, that really helped you, Gabe. And when we figured that out, And you don't have to like really overdo it, but just he was much more comfortable in places he'd been before. So if you're going to be going to someplace new, maybe a new concert venue or something like that, it might help to get there early. So you can look around and feel more comfortable in the space. If possible, maybe you want to check it out the day before. And then of course, once you've done it, you're good. So the next time you go to a concert there, the next time you go to an event there, you'll already feel comfortable with the space. That was it was surprising how extremely helpful that was for Gabe.
All right, we've got a comment. We're going to pop it on the screen now.
Oh, it turns out you're not a Jedi. Oh, that is so sad.
Now!
Pointing for you.
Yay! I feel like I did it even though I didn't.
Aw, I'm going through a divorce and my ex and I are still great friends. I love hearing you talk about that. I could talk about it for a long time, so you're in luck.
We're going to talk about it for a moment because it's weird. I was in a psychiatric hospital. I thought about suicide every day since I was little. I almost died by suicide. I had bipolar disorder that went untreated, and my family tried to punish the symptoms of an illness out of me. I jumped off a roof. I spent just so much money being manic. Hypersexuality was a big thing. It took me 4 years from the time that I was diagnosed to get the right treatment. I tried so many medications, and the number one thing that people want to talk about in all of that is, wait, you're friends with your ex-wife and you don't have kids? Why? And this has been happening so long, we've sort of developed pat answers, but sincerely, and this is not true for everybody, but Lisa was instrumental in getting me help. My family didn't realize I was sick because they didn't have the education. Lisa helped me get well. She explained the early steps of mental illness to me, and that's like an amazing friend, right? That's not the kind of person that you just discard. And what she did was so amazing that we got married because of it. We were joined by this. Oh my God, she saved my life. Like, do you know the emotions that stirs up in somebody? And then I got well, and we realized we didn't have a lot in common. We had a lot in common to be friends, but we had completely different life goals, values, and things like that are not compatible for marriage. And if Lisa and I would have been our best selves when we met, we would have gone out on a few dates, and Lisa would be relegated to the, someday I would tell, I don't know, my children or whatever, to be, Daddy, who'd you date? Well, a long time ago, I met this really nice blonde woman. She was a physicist. We went out on a few dates, and she was so fascinating. We had great conversations, but
I would definitely have been the one who got away. That's all I'm saying.
No, you wouldn't have been.
No, I totally would have been.
You would have been the one who wanted to spend every week traveling, and I would have been the one who wanted to stay home.
Why would you want to stay home? You've already been home. You don't need to stay home. It's ridiculous.
And we would have just realized through that's why you date, right? To realize that, hey, we don't make a good romantic couple. And it unfortunately, we were married, and we had been married for 5 years when we realized this. And we started looking at our options. Our options were to stay married and be miserable. That's not a good option. Our second option was get divorced and forget that the other person ever existed. Now, that doesn't mean animosity or anger. It just means never seeing that other person again. But what presented itself was this third option. We could just right size. We could just be the friends that we always should have been, and start from here and move forward. And listen, I'm not saying that we never get into an argument that is clearly a husband and wife argument, something that we're pissed off about that happened when we were married that we just can't let go. We are human, but mostly we just build a friendship on the things that we have in common that make us great friends. And it is nice that we have this thing that connects us, which is Lisa did save my life. But I just want to stress that I'm sad that there are only two choices when a romantic relationship doesn't work out. Either you never see each other again, or you hate the other person. It just really doesn't seem like why can't there be a friend option, and why is it so weird?
The thing that has always surprised me is, one, that it never seemed weird to me. And maybe it should have, maybe that was naive, but it never seemed odd to me. It never seemed strange that we were going to be divorced yet still stay in contact or still remain friends. It never occurred to me that, certainly I have many ex-boyfriends where you think, hey, I wonder what happened to that guy. Where's he now? I don't know. it never occurred to me that that was going to happen with us, that he wouldn't always be a part of my life. And I don't know if that was just naive, but it never occurred to me. And then one of the things Gabe said one time, and I'm going to not say it as well, is that why is it considered more socially acceptable or more mentally healthy if you hate this person? Because again, the opposite of love is not hate, it's indifference. So why is it considered more emotionally healthy, more mature, better for you, a sign of a person who is in a better place if you hate this person? And even though you haven't been married to them for years, you're still having all this hatred and you're still talking all the time about how they're so evil and they're so terrible and they ruined your life. But for some reason, dwelling on that and being that way is better than our system.
It's very weird. Yeah.
It is. It is. And we get that all the time.
Let's try the high five again.
Okay. No. Okay. One. Oh, yeah, I figured it out. Okay.
Hey, ready?
Yeah.
Ready?
Yeah.
Go.
Yeah.
All right, we're ready with the next
like
question.
What happens when we try to high hive in real life. Yeah.
Ready? Question.
I'm just so proud of myself for figuring that out.
Hey!
All right. The next question is, what changes or reform do you feel we need in mental health care in the U.S.? I feel we need DNA testing, cannabis legislation, and affordable care. Well, how much time do you have? There is a lot of room for improvement in the mental health care system in the U.S. We have multiple podcasts, and Gabe has multiple writing on the subject. What was the thing that struck you the first? For me, the first thing would be affordable care and the idea of access, that there's not enough care available, and what is there is not affordable by the vast majority of people. What was the first thing that hit you, Gabe?
When I think of mental health reform, I think of healthcare reform.
Well, yeah, it goes together. That's a good point. Anything that you could say about mental health care, you could also say about healthcare. How does the healthcare system in the U.S. need to be improved in terms of lack of access, financing, our payment system, insurance companies, doctors, on and on and on, all those things for mental health care.
I was going to say all that, but thanks, Lisa, for your help.
I said it better.
I got that first. We need healthcare reform in this country for a number of reasons, but I'm gonna honor the question and stick to mental health care. One of the things when it comes to mental illness is let's talk about when the average crisis point or diagnosis is. The average age is 16 to 24. Now, in America, and I'm only speaking for America, we are expected to get our health insurance from our employers. Well, 16 to 24, that's if you've got a really good family, if you've got good parents, then yeah, maybe you've got health insurance from them, but that's not always a lock, and we can't control who we're born with. And depending on, we have the Affordable Care Act, which has closed some loopholes, but it's not perfect. So when you're the ages of 16 to 24, you don't have this nest egg. You don't have this good job that you've worked up to that has the good insurance. Because remember, in America, to get good insurance, you have to have a good job. We actually say things like, oh, that's a good job. It has good insurance. That means somebody else has a bad job with bad insurance.
Or no insurance.
Or no insurance, because employers are supposed to provide health care, but only if you work 40 hours. So if you work 30 hours, they don't have to provide health care. So how many employers are just deciding to keep all of their employees at 30 hours so that they don't have to provide health care? I don't know. Could it be maybe some of the largest employers in America? And this is all very problematic because here you are, you're 16 to 24, you haven't been established yet, you're out and now you're sick. You're sick. And mental illness can look a lot like laziness or, depression. I don't want to get out of bed. Well, that can look like he doesn't want to get a job. It's tough because everybody's looking at you and thinking, well, he's just too lazy to work. He's not willing to help himself. And that's not the case. That is just how this illness looks. So when we talk about healthcare reform, can you imagine the differences if every single person had access to good quality wraparound services for all health? But again, I'm honoring the question and keeping it to mental health. The reason that I am well, the reason that I did so well and reached recovery with bipolar disorder is not because I'm extra smart. It's not because I'm extra special. It's not even because I worked harder. It's simply because I had access to care from beginning, middle, and end. And I did have access to a good family and friends. I had Elisa, for example. But even moving that aside, there are so many people, they want to get well, but they're on a 6-month waiting list to see a doctor. And then because it's the free doctor, that 13 minutes because those doctors are overwhelmed. They can't get wraparound services like, assistance with houses or paying for medication or even a ride. Just you're severely mentally ill. You're in the middle of psychosis and they're like, oh, 6 months from now, we want you to show up to this address at 3:00. You don't know what day it is. You're sick. They're just unfair burdens in the way that we treat mental illness in this country. And if you don't have a payer source, forget it. It's almost luck at this point. I would start there. Healthcare is a huge problem in America, and mental health care is an even bigger problem because it's the redheaded stepchild of healthcare. I could go on and on forever, but I would sincerely start there. Sincerely. I don't know why in America, the richest country on earth, we've decided that we don't want to take care of sick people, but we don't. And I believe that people with mental illness are particularly vulnerable because of the nature of the illness and because the age of onset.
Well, and because a lot of the symptoms of mental illness are going to keep you from being employed or having steady employment or having full-time employment. And again, since we've tied our health care, people always say, oh, we've tied our health insurance to our employment. But for a lot of people, health insurance and health care are synonyms because if you don't have one, you don't have the other. So we've actually tied our health care to our employment. And for a group of people that are having trouble holding down a steady job or who maybe can't hold down a 40-hour-a-week job, that's never going to work. It's never going to be successful.
All righty, ready for the next question? We've got a ton.
And I was about to say, absolutely. Definitely, Gabe.
Definitely. All right. Lisa, we got a ton of them, so we're gonna move faster. Here we go. Boom.
All right. Josh asks, do you ever get really tired and struggle to get up and out? This is how my depression affects me. Yes, I do. Yes, all the time. That is probably the number one thing that I struggle with in terms of depression. And I had a conversation with a doctor about this many, many years ago. And he said, well, I think you need some adjustments to your antidepressants. And I said, no, because I'm not sad. I'm not sad. I'm no longer suicidal. I'm not crying all the time. I am not sad. Therefore, my antidepressants are perfect and do not need any alterations or changes. And he pointed out to me that that's not all depression is. It's also the apathy and the not being able to get up and about and the lack of energy and laying in bed all day. It's not just about sadness. So yes, I absolutely have that problem all the time. Well, much less than I used to, but yes, that has always been one of my main depression symptoms.
Lisa, the question wasn't like, I mean, I guess the question kind of was, do you ever, okay, you answered the question.
Do you ever get really tired and struggle to get out? Yes.
All right.
Yes, I do.
All right. I am wrong. You are right. You can make this your ringtone. How do you get over it? Sincerely, you do struggle with
depression, period.
But how do you personally move forward when you don't want to leave, when you don't want to get out of bed, when you don't want to start the day? What do you do? Because sincerely, and I mean this as a compliment, there's no, I'm not getting ready to pull the rug out from under you. You still get a lot done while you're depressed. How do you get so much done when you're depressed? What steps do you take to make it more manageable?
Well, some of it is going to be luck, obviously, or that you cycle out of it after a given amount of time. So if you kind of have to make sure it's coming. You know this period is going to come where you're not going to be able to get out of bed. So do as much as you can when that's not happening. Kind of build up your stock of, I've built up a cushion of time for myself. Obviously, you want to work closely with your doctor. Make sure that you've got, because as you get older, as you gain weight, lose weight, just anything that happens to your body is going to affect your medication. It's very frustrating. You've been taking the same meds for years and now all of a sudden they don't work right. It's terrible. So constantly being on top of that, even though I've taken antidepressants almost 20 years. So you feel like you can be ready to be complacent about it. That I don't really need to think about that anymore. Nah. You still got to think about it all the time. I'm going to give you a hint of what I want you to say. Well, I haven't gotten there yet.
You make lists I think
Yep.
that
List
this is
important.
I stole this from you, which is why I love the idea so much. You make lists and break things down into bite-sized chunks. So
Mhm.
the day looks a lot simpler when all you have to do to cross something off your list, for example, is get out of bed. Can you talk about how you came up with the idea for the list and how you break down complex things simply? Because again, sincerely, you get a lot done while depressed. You don't just
I'm
wait to
making that
cycle. You
my
don't call the
ringtone.
doctor. You you are depressed, but you still accomplish a lot of tasks.
I did read this book years ago called Getting Things Done While You're Depressed.
By the great
And
Julie Fast.
yes, it was excellent. And it actually was very helpful because, on the one hand, you do have to be at a certain level of base functioning because if you're really bad, yeah, you're not going to be able to just pull yourself up by your bootstraps and help yourself. That's not going to work. So, but if you are at that slightly higher level where you still have some functioning but you're not where you want to be, yeah, absolutely. Just force yourself to do things. It really helps because, obviously when you start getting stuff done, you feel less depressed. It becomes this feedback loop. So forcing yourself to get stuff done is very helpful. And it makes your depression a lot better than you would think. But yeah, lists are very valuable. And Gabe did this for a long time. It's because when you're depressed, it's hard to organize things in your mind and you feel like, oh my God, you have so much to do that you almost don't even know where to start. Like there's so much, it's so overwhelming. You're just, I can't even begin. There's so much. Lists are extremely helpful. If you make lists of everything you want to get done, and if you have to break them down into smaller points, that's also very helpful because again, it's so hard to focus and concentrate and see the big picture that if you can write it down, it's a lot easier to figure out where you're going.
Lisa, thank you so much. You are awesome, and she writes lists on her hands. I think
I
do you
I do
have
have a
it on your
trouble
hand
with
right now?
no, I washed it off for the podcast.
Ah, you're awesome.
I do make a lot of lists. You have to carry the problem is that I tend to make lists on any random scrap of paper, like the back of a receipt or the back of an envelope or whatever. And then of course, you get like there's 9 things on the list. You crossed off 8 of them, but now I still got to remember the ninth one. So I got to save that receipt until I get to the ninth one. So inevitably, I will have a giant pile of random pieces of paper just sitting somewhere. And then my husband will be like, well, you needed all those old receipts? They weren't receipts. They were valuable, important lists. So
are you ready for the next question?
get yourself a notebook, but I'm never that organized.
All right. I'm gonna do the magic.
Okay, we're getting a new question. New question.
Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Poof.
Ooh, his Jedi powers are back. Asking as someone in a manager position, is it okay to ask questions when someone brings up mental health issues, such as how you cope and what are your triggers? I have panic disorder. I can relate, but don't want to cross the line.
So this is really, really tough. One of the things that Lisa and I do in our spare time is workplace mental health and workplace suicide prevention. And the quick answer is sort of. And that's where it gets really, really tricky. It is okay to have a conversation, especially if they're the driving force. And one of the things that you said, is it okay to ask questions when they bring up mental health issues? Yes, but you need to be careful. You have to tread lightly. The example that we use in the training is it okay to ask somebody if they have children? No, it is not okay to ask somebody if they have children. However, if they have volunteered that they have children, then it is okay to ask them about their children. How is little Johnny? Did little Jackie enjoy the camping trip this weekend? Because obviously we want to have a workplace that is friendly and familiar, but it is not okay to say, hey, do little Jackie and little Johnny prevent you from getting the promotion? Or, we were thinking about promoting you, but we're worried about little Jackie and little Johnny taking up your time. So you've got to start thinking in those lines. If you're having a generic question or a generic conversation about mental health disorders, understanding how you as their manager can make the workplace more friendly or compatible for them, that is okay. If you are saying things like, I completely understand, this is obviously good too, because you want to be an ally and you want to help. But obviously you cannot ask questions like, well, we're afraid to promote you, Gabe, because we think that somebody with anxiety disorder shouldn't be in charge of client cases. That's going to get you in trouble real quick. If you have a big enough company, please engage your human resources department and have these conversations maybe with HR present. If you are just having a general conversation where you are listening or you are providing reassurance, always, always, always handy. just be careful not to cross that line and tie mental illness or mental health issues into things like their pay or promotion or continued employment. You've got to be extraordinarily careful. Lisa is probably one of the most accomplished researchers I've ever met, and she knows a lot about crossing the line and being careful. So I know that she has stuff to add to this. And it's tough because you need to balance that, being friendly, receptive, and kind with not crossing the line. Lisa?
Well, and we are not lawyers, but if you want to involve, if you have a big enough company, you want to involve human resources, you want to involve all of the resources that you have available to you. And the only thing I would also say is let this person lead the conversation. You're saying that they're coming to you with these issues. You didn't come to them. That's a good choice. And you say, how do you cope and what are your triggers? Obviously, in a management position, that would be extremely helpful because that isn't about mental illness or mental health so much as it is how to have the best working environment and therefore the most productivity out of this particular employee. So if you can frame your questions in that way of what can we do, not so much to make your mental illness better or to make you less anxious, but what can we do to help you work better? What can we do so that you can, stay on calls longer, get more done, not miss things? If you can frame it as workplace improvement or performance improvement rather than how do you manage the symptoms of mental illness, that might be helpful.
The final thing that I'm going to say, reading it sounds like you personally have questions and you want to talk to somebody who's in the same boat. This is of course very, very tricky because on one hand, as a manager, you should not be friends with your employees, and there's nothing more friendly than sharing something as serious as an illness. But at the same time, it's very important to get that support. I would recommend finding a better outlet than your employee. It's sort of a don't crap where you eat kind of thing, but I understand how tough that is. So I want to be really, really fair. All right, we are moving right along. We've got we've got so many we've got a ton of questions. All right, are you ready for the next one?
I am.
And
I said I am, not absolutely.
I said, Jedi, there it is.
All right, Katie Clark asks, how do you deal with suicidal thoughts?
So
that's a difficult question.
Yeah, suicidal thoughts are something that you need to take extraordinarily seriously. For one thing, you're going to want to report them immediately to people around you, to doctors, to everybody. And I know that sometimes, the answer to these questions can't all be, call your doctor. And I get that. But suicidal thoughts they're really far along the process. There's spectrum wise, they're in the danger zone. And when you're in the danger zone, you want to do something immediately. The way that I personally deal with suicidal thoughts is, one, I tell somebody immediately. Whether it's my bestie Lisa, whether it's my wife, I tell somebody I can trust and who I have prepped ahead of time. Somebody that I've had conversations with, hey, when I get to this point, here are some of the things that I need you to be thinking about and doing. The worst time to have a fire drill is when the place is on fire. When everything is fine, sit somebody down and say, look, when I have suicidal thoughts and I come to you, I need you to do some version of the following things and discuss what those things are. Finally, again, the next thing that I do is I make an appointment with my therapist immediately. I also utilize things like peer support, whether I go to a local peer center or drop-in center so that I can be around people, whether I call the National Suicide Hotline and hear a trained voice to help, talk me off the proverbial ledge. The bottom line is that I inform people, including my doctor, and I do something. I believe that the best advice that I can give you is do not, under any circumstances, ignore suicidal thoughts, and make sure that the people you are telling are people who are trained to handle it. So often when we're feeling suicidal, we go into a chat room and we just blurt it out. And while that is better than nothing, a lot of times the people in there aren't trained to handle it. Unfortunately, that happens a lot, so they might be numb to it. It's also online, so they're not really in the best position to help you. So make sure you have somebody in real life that you can call or go to and manage that symptom. Lisa, anything to add?
Well, this is what safety plans are for. If you know that you're prone to this at the time period when you're not having these thoughts, is the time to set all of these things in place to actually you can find 1,001 templates online to actually fill out what is my plan when I feel this way, what do I do, what is the next step, so you can have it all mapped out for you ahead of time. Because obviously when you're super sick, you just can't think this stuff through. It's really hard to react in the moment. And then I had suicidal thoughts my entire life. I had suicidal thoughts. I've had doctors tell me that really young kids can't feel that way, but the way I remember it, I did. I have suicidal thoughts as long as I could remember, up through I got a good handle on my depression in my 20s. And I was actually only a few years ago that a doctor actually said to me, suicidal thoughts are never normal. And I thought, what? Well, that can't be right. It's not that big of a deal. That's not that big of a deal. That's super normal. Yeah. It turns out, that's never normal. Yeah, turns out that's a big deal and a symptom you need to report right away, and not just some random thing you can dismiss. And again, I had them so often for so long, they felt very normal to me. And even now that they've been gone for a long time, when someone says to me, that's not normal, I think, but isn't it? Isn't it? Or, most people, that's something I learned. Did you know that most people never have suicidal thoughts? Never. In their whole lives, they never once have this thought. Mind blown. Oh my God. I was amazed by that. But it turns out you get used to whatever you're used to, and you don't see that you're aberrant. So yeah, turns out that's never normal and always a bad thing. I learned that like 3 years ago, and it blew my mind.
Mind blown. All right. Are you
Yeah.
ready for the next question? I'm going to, you do
Sure.
the magic thing this time, Lisa.
I can't, because I can't understand, like I said, because this should be my other arm. I need a mirror.
Woof.
I need a mirror.
Yay!
Wow. I am back on meds for bipolar after being unmedicated for 20 years. On meds, my creative drive gets diminished. Can you offer a workaround to deal with issues with meds and encouraging your caring and creative urge?
Yeah.
Me or you?
I'm going to go first. So obviously I do not know you. So, and I don't live in your body. So I'm going to take everything that you say at face value. And there's a part of me that wants to say, well, how creative can you be if you're sick? Or, people talk about some of the greatest artists of our time who were so creative, but of course, because they weren't getting treated, they died by suicide. So that's an awful lot of creativity that was lost because they died young. So I just want to mention that briefly, because I want to give you full props for getting help, because you can't be creative when you're super sick or if you're not with us anymore. So please keep that in mind. So let's talk around workarounds to deal with medication. Again, I'm taking everything that you say as face value, that you are more creative off meds than you are on meds. The first thing is, just real quick, sometimes we need to do, sort of a check. When I am manic, I believe that I am so much more productive. I believe it. I feel it. I know it. And working with my therapist, showed me like, okay, well, you said that you were more productive when you were manic. What did you accomplish? And I was like, well, I did this. Okay, well, did any of those things get finished? No. Did any of them amount to anything? No. Okay, now you're medicated and you're saying that you're not as productive, but I see here that you own a business, you're completing these articles, you've gotten hired, you've got contracts, you got married. So just, while you may not seem that, so just it's important to maybe keep that in mind. But truly, it's also really important to consider that creativity comes from how you feel. And what's in your gut and your mind and your heart and what drives your imagination. And sometimes I feel that people put an unfair label on it, and they say like, oh, that's so amazing. You're much more creative than me. Well, but who gets to decide? I mean, do we really get to decide that J.K. Rowling is the most creative person in the world because Harry Potter is so amazing? I think that Harry Potter is amazing, but, I have friends that they write short stories that are great as well, and they're never going to make them a billionaire. So sometimes I think that we just judge creativity through maybe this unrealistic lens, and that has nothing to do with bipolar disorder. It has nothing to do with mental health. I think that we don't respect creativity in this country. We ask musicians to play for free and artists to provide their art for free, and we just really devalue creativity. And I think that sometimes that skews how we're looking at it. Perhaps off the meds you feel more creative, but you're more productive on them. Or, health has its own benefits. Or maybe you could look at some of the stuff that you started when you were off the meds and maybe didn't finish it. And now that you're on the meds, you can add that zhuzh to get it over the finish line. And it can be a nice combo piece. Or I was going to say get creative. But sincerely,
That's good.
I think that creativity is one of those things that I think that it is part feeling, part productivity, and part the reaction of those around us. And I think it's so subjective that to be able to say specifically that you are less creative now, I think that's maybe unfair. I think that maybe now you are just creative in a different way. It's a little bit of reframing, but I think there's a lot of power in that. And that's what really helped me when I was really, really missing mania. Lisa, your thoughts as somebody who's
Well,
unfortunately never, no, I was going to, as unfortunately has never experienced mania. Yes, it's unfortunate that you're not
yes,
severely.
that's so sad for me.
What are your
Um,
thoughts?
well, I would say just echo a few of the things that you said, which is everybody knows that guy who says, "Oh, whenever I'm high, I say such profound things. Like my thoughts are so great when I'm high." Yeah, but if you like videotape that guy and then play it back for him, he realizes. So your impression of your creativity might not be as accurate. But again, you know yourself best. So if you feel that this is the case, but sometimes your impression of yourself is not as accurate as what other people around you are seeing. And then this is something that I struggled with a lot when I first started taking antidepressants, which was it was changing me. It was changing the things I did. It was changing the things I thought about and what part of me and what part of me is illness and on and on and what am I losing? And I finally came to a kind of a more practical standpoint on it, which was if I don't take these pills, I'm going to die because I'm going to die by suicide. So whatever amount of me that I'm able to keep will be irrelevant. So maybe again with the reframing, if you're thinking to yourself, look, if I don't stay medicated, it doesn't matter how creative I am if I can't finish the project. If I can never let that project never bring anyone else into it, if I can never show it to anyone else, if it never gets released into the world. So that Gabe.
That's it. All right.
Yeah,
Just,
that's it.
if
I
it
don't
never
know.
gets
I
released in the
have to
world,
figure out how
all
to
right,
wrap.
you
No,
just
that's
kind
just
of trailed right off there.
well, that's the end of my sentence. What I was going to say
No,
again.
no, you're fine. You're fine. Ready for the
You
next
can't
question?
miss. All right, next
We've
question.
got like
Boom.
we've only got a few minutes left. So Lisa,
Okay.
all of these questions are rapid fire. We get
Got it.
30 seconds
Ready.
for each one. Are you ready?
Okay,
First
okay.
question
We need a timer.
now.
How can you overcome mental illness when you don't have a support person outside of a doctor, a therapist? Do you need one? That is an incredibly tough. That is an incredibly tough question. Obviously, the more support you have, the better. When you say outside of a doctor or therapist, that's really good. Don't discount that. That's a very important part of your support system. So don't act like that's nothing. And then number two, have you considered peer support? Most cities, most even online, if that's all you can go for, peer support, it's free. And have you considered a peer support group? It helps you find people in the same position, even if you don't know these people already in your life.
And peer support works in all kinds of different ways, from just your standard group model where where you sit in a room with 10 other people who all live with mental illness, sort of like Alcoholics Anonymous would be an example of a peer support group that a lot of people are familiar with. There's lots of different ones. Look them up. There's national ones like Emotions Anonymous that are a good place for people with mental health issues and things like that. So peer support is really powerful. If you live in a bigger city and you have a drop-in center or a clubhouse, it's really great to get peer support there. Finally, online peer support in forums like at psychcentral.com or themighty.com. There's good forums there. Again, take what you like and leave the rest. I always say, pretend it's a buffet. When you go to a buffet and you don't like a food on there, you don't start yelling at the food or get offended by the food or point at the food and scream at the food and say that food has no right to be on the buffet. No, you just don't put that particular food on your plate. I really, really recommend that. But there's a way to get some in-person support that is not a therapist or a doctor, etc. And I think that it's a powerful thing. It will take some time to put together, but I do believe that you can get there. All right, ready? In the rapid firing.
I'm
Poof!
going. Hello from the UK. Do you find that your memory is affected with bipolar disorder?
Yes, I do. And I find that my memory is affected in very odd ways. For one thing, my memory is impacted because, for example, when I experience psychosis, it feels very real. So my memory is that XYZ happened. And I believe it with all of my might. But of course, it's a symptom of psychosis. It wasn't actually happening. I just believed that it was happening or felt like it was happening. That's what delusions are. Also on some medication, slight memory loss, it can be a symptom or a side effect. And it's hard to tease that out a little bit too, because of course, as I get older, my memory naturally slips. So to answer the question very, very quickly and briefly, yes, I do find that my memory is impacted by bipolar disorder, but I've also found that my memory is impacted by aging or being busy or stress and things like that. So it's important not to blame bipolar disorder when, aging or a side effect could also be something. I really do think that is a symptom that a lot of people, it's underreported to doctors. They don't want to report to doctors that they're having this issue because they think that it's unrelated. Please report that symptom, because a lot of times there is actually something that you can do about it. All right, Lisa, we got time for like one more quick one.
Okay, and to help with your memory, make lists.
Oh, yeah. All righty.
Yeah.
This is the very last one.
Last question.
And I think it's about exercise, and poof!
How do you exercise with depression? Asks Patience Parker. I'm not.
We're
not big exercisers. I don't know if it's not easy to maintain this physique, right? Yeah. I'm not a big exerciser. I would say that you do it the same way that you do anything else with depression, which is get yourself in a good place with your medication, with your therapy, and then ultimately you just have to force yourself. And that can be very, very difficult to do. I do know a lot of people who talk at length about how exercise helps their depression substantially. I have many members of my own family who feel the runner's high, et cetera. That's a real thing. And that without that, they would really struggle with mental illness in a way that they don't, because they have such a consistent exercise routine. So try to do it as much as you can. It can be extremely helpful.
Here's my quick answer. First off, exercise is one of these things. Everybody thinks of exercise is like what the people on TV are doing, the marathon runners, the athletes, the on and on and on and on. Remember, getting up and walking around the block is exercise. Walking from your house to the mailbox is exercise. Doing things like dusting or cleaning or even just walking outside and throwing the ball with the dog is exercise. The best way to exercise while depressed is baby steps. Take very, 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 very small steps. You can do it. I believe that any movement is exercise. And I think it's extraordinarily important to give yourself credit for the movement that you do, because frankly, when you're depressed, putting on shoes and walking to the end of the driveway and back is monumental, and it will build from there. Everybody, we are running behind, so we have to go really, 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 really quickly. Please, my name is Gabe Howard. With me, as always, is Lisa Kiner. We are the hosts of the Not Crazy podcast, the mental health podcast for people who hate mental health podcasts. It's available on psychcentral.com/notcrazy, or just search Not Crazy on your favorite podcast player. You'll see a picture of Gabe and Lisa. We will see everybody